Good morning or afternoon or even evening, depending on where everybody is located. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Melissa Munier, and as we wait for the participants to join in, I am going to cover a few housekeeping items that we'll also post in the chat. All of our participants are muted. The conversation is being recorded, and we'll have that available on the Engage to Excel website and via an email to everyone who registered for the session. And then we do encourage questions that you can enter in the Q&A on the lower bottom of the screen. And if we don't get to all the questions today, we will send you a response directly as long as you don't post anonymously. So just give it another minute. Hopefully, depending on where everybody's located, everyone is staying cool today.
No doubt.
All right, Andrea and Darren, I think we've got a great group joining us today, so I'm going to just kick it off with some introductions. As I mentioned, my name is Melissa Munier. I lead the marketing team here at Engage to Excel. I will be the moderator along with Kathleen Erdy, who's managing the event in the background. Today, joining us, our two guests, our very own Andrea Shepard and Darren Findley. Welcome. Andrea leads our global team, and she's a passionate and strategic leader who is known for her creative thinking and her drive to succeed. And then Darren leads our recruitment solutions division as a whole and the business strategy. And he's, as many people who have attended some of our other conversation series, what we like to call our resident labor market expert. So thank you both for joining us today to talk more about hiring in a noisy market. Thank you both. Great.
Cool.
All right, well then let's get started. Andrea, Darren, I'm going to turn it over to you and turn my camera off. Thank you both.
Sounds good. Thanks, Melissa.
Right.
Thanks everyone for being on today and for joining us for our conversation. And don't forget to put your questions or comments in the chat. We'll take a look at those as we go, and we'll be happy to have additional conversation with you along the way. Andrea,
Well, Darren,
you
I
have a
guess
question for me, don't you?
I do. If we're talking about recruiting, let me ask you before we get started, what is one recruiting pet peeve of yours?
Andrea, you've known me a long time. I have a lot of pet peeves, and they're mostly about how I behave as a recruiting manager. You know, when I think about all the times I've done recruiting and while we still do them in today, one of my biggest pet peeves is a hiring manager that doesn't really know what they want to hire or changes what they want to hire halfway through the process and then says, "Oh, maybe I just want to see everyone." And that is me. I'm the world's worst. I have to admit it. I'm the world's worst hiring manager. And I try not to be. I try to be very specific, but it seems like every time I default to that same old pet peeve of my own. So how about you?
Mine is more on the candidate side as the recruiter. I would say, I crack up when people say that they're detail oriented, which people want to put that all over their resume, but then you'll see that they have typos in the same sentence. And hopefully in the world of technology that we're in, people can get over all the typos in a resume, but that's probably my number one. It knocks candidates out right away.
Yeah.
Um, all right, so I know that we have a brief session and we've got just about 30 minutes. So I do want to jump in and we'll kind of kick it off. Darren, I wanted to ask you a question and just ask, when you think about today's hiring landscape and what's the biggest misconception you're hearing just out there in general? And I know that, as Melissa said, you've got a lot of labor market insight, but also a lot of the recruiting and talent acquisition insight.
Yeah, I think there's so much going on, and it's the pace of change is so rapid. It's hard to just put, say one thing that's out there. The labor market is noisy and it's not. So that's kind of a misnomer. A lot of people are not just so sure what that noisy labor market means right now, or the volatility, I think is probably a better word for it, that we see in the labor market. But when I think about misconceptions, because people are not so sure about, well, there's not as many jobs out there and there's plenty of candidates on the market. And one of the biggest, I think, misconceptions that it's a buyer's market right now. So you can relax on candidate experience, you can relax on speed, and just because it doesn't feel like it did in 21 and 22 in the first part of 23, when it was just a crazy frenzied market, doesn't mean that there's still less competition for quality of hires. And the noisy market's not so much about the lack of candidates that are out there, but it's the difficulty in and creating like real interest, managing those expectations and then standing out, because you just don't see people changing jobs like you did 2, 3 years ago. It is slowed down significantly. And you think about, just because hiring is slow, doesn't mean that the candidates are going to wait around. The good candidates you're still going to lose if you don't move fast, because the good candidates are still getting offers, and they're being, being competed for. And then neglecting that, the candidate experience, and damaging your employer brand, because you feel like, hey, we're not as busy as we were, so we can relax a little bit, and it doesn't really matter. And then assuming that candidates are desperate is another thing that you see a lot of times. People come in lowball offers and less competitive benefits. They've pulled some benefits back as they've tried to, manage their P&L. So I think at the end of the day, it's not really a buyer's market at all. The candidate experience has still got to be on the forefront of everyone's mind.
What's the data from a labor market perspective? What do you see in kind of the overall labor market data as to where things are trending right now?
I would say, if you just look at the data itself, it looks flat. So the optics of the labor market are very, very flat. The number of open jobs has come down. Unemployment rate pretty doggone steady between 4.1, 4.2. The labor participation rate has dropped some overall, but the labor participation rate for the prime working age, when you think about people that are like 24 to 54, has actually gone up just a little bit. And that's mostly because the cohorts of boomers have moved. That's a greater share of the population. That's going to continue to go just for a little bit longer, until we hit the cliff in about 4 years, when you see those boomers really retiring much more in mass, and they're going to start moving out of the labor market. So I think if you look at the labor market data, it is definitely flat. Some would even say that the labor market's shrinking overall, which that's the way it's going to feel, but it's not collapsing, and wages are stable overall. And I just think that, even like Mike Rowe talking about, there's like between 6.7 and 7.2 million men that are out of the labor market today. That's impactful, and that's going to continue to create strain in the workforce. And I think a lot of people are talking about a white collar labor market recession today, because you've seen a big slowdown in white collar hiring, but the blue collar needs are still there. They're still robust, and they're driving a lot of the jobs that are being hired out there today. So the numbers may look flat, but I think it's a little bit deceiving overall.
Yeah. Great. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. So when you think about that, that labor market, and not to go back to a pet peeve, but maybe think about, what do you think there's like one internal habit that slows down the hiring process when you think about candidate experience overall? And what's that one thing you see people doing, internally in their own teams, that maybe slows down the hiring process more than people realize?
I would say it's the lack of timely communication. We know in business, communication is key. It's probably 90% of business, right? So not having alignment between the hiring managers and the recruiters is where we really see a lot of that slowdown. And that kind of manifests a number of different ways. You've got, whether it's delayed feedback on a candidate, or if you go back to the very beginning, if a recruiter isn't acting, and we talk industry wide a lot about those recruiters elevating and truly being talent advisors, they've got to make sure that they, I'll use you as the example, where it's like, you've got to control that hiring manager. You've got to make sure that you're getting, not vague understanding of what they want. And I hate to say lock them in, but make sure you're clearly aligned on what the job requirements are and what they're looking for. And so we know that the whole point of having a recruiting team is to take that workload off of the hiring managers, so they can go do their day job. I mean, they've got a very full-time job, regardless of industry, that they should be focused on. And the hiring managers don't always have the time or make the time to prioritize interviews. That's become a really interesting trend. I know for a lot of teams, especially the last probably 2 years, they're tracking not candidate no-show rates, but hiring manager not showing up to interviews, and making sure that those metrics are being discussed, so that you're going back and making sure the organization is prioritizing, again, candidate experience, but also those qualified folks. So just, if we have a lack of understanding of what they're looking for and we're not getting timely feedback from the hiring manager, I really feel like that's the big disconnect, is when it comes to just the overall communication, which drives speed and experience for the candidate.
It's a good metric, I think, too, just to kind of measure the health of the relationship between the TA teams and the business itself.
Right.
Oh, and that's it sounds like a small thing in reality, but it does make a huge impact once you find that alignment overall.
Yeah, it just fosters kind of that overall true partnership between talent acquisition and the hiring managers and their understanding of the business, right?
Yep.
Um, so I'll ask you, if when we think about all this, what's one process change that you've seen make a big impact with kind of minimal effort? Where can people start just to get things going in the right direction?
Well, of course, when you think about efficiency, and we've worked on this for years and change management for years, one of the biggest things you can do is like standardizing and simplifying interview feedback collection. And it is so common to see every manager, every recruiter, every unit inside of an organization have their own way of providing that feedback, right? And
Mhm.
so whether it's where the recruiting team does it, where they put their information in their ATS, where they put it somewhere else, it doesn't matter. Yeah, you got to standardize it, right? And even better if you can make it reportable along the way. But if you do that, it's going to really help you reduce decision-making time and really help you clarify strengths and weaknesses and minimize biases overall as well. And so really making that standardization I think is really important. It doesn't really require, new software. It's just about, clear guidelines, a concise form, something that's easy to use, using a consistent, rubric or, role-based, competencies, whatever it is, and then requiring a 24-hour feedback. It really is just a few simple things around that process that will really help you um, drive an impact in the organization. And there's a lot of great tools that are out there. We even use a tool internally, and we did this after some experimentation with other tools, right? And so we have one centralized tool that we use that actually will help auto generate interview guides and auto fill the answers in, right, for a lot of those answers that are the candidates get receiving. So it listens, it helps with the dictation, puts those in there, so it reduces the amount of time that a recruiter has to spend either type in real time on what the answers are. They can be focused on the conversation, focused on the relationship, and then just edit and then, and then save it all overall. But there's a lot of things that can be done. But I think that's one of the biggest things that you see to drive consistency along the way. And I'm not here to sell, our technology today, but we've got a great tool called the candidate comparison grid, right? And so the information's in and it's scored in there, and a hiring manager can look across on one screen and see these three candidates, how they compare side to side on multiple items, right? They're all evaluated the same. They're evaluated on those items. You can see how they score across that. But that really is a process that had to be standardized, had to be trained, had to be monitored and executed on. So now it's the same really for everyone. And the managers love it, right? I can go and I can see these three are great, add a fourth one in if I want to look at the four, compare them, and then make a decision. It speeds up decision making along the way, maintains your documentation in the system for all of our friends in legal and compliance, right? It's going to help you get all those things done. But it doesn't require software, like I said, but it is a way that software, AI software we're using today could actually, help impact that simple process change of standardizing that. When I think about, software, there's all kinds of tech and software that's out there today. And I'll just kind of throw it back to you. If a team could only upgrade, one part of their tech stack, where should they start?
And I'll answer this knowing that most teams have a tech stack, right? So we're not talking about an ATS or the bare basics. It's one where, with all the stuff I'm seeing, I would kind of focus on the CRM. And so if making sure that you've got a system that effectively manages those candidate relationships, just to allow for talent pipelining and nurturing those passive candidates and improving engagement. And just because somebody might not be a fit today, we do want them to be a fit. We want them to be a yes tomorrow and down the road, or maybe when they have even more experience. Um, just that strong CRM component can really boost the recruiter efficiency and effectiveness when it comes to engaging those candidates in the future. I don't know if you saw that yesterday, the New York Times put out an article about job applicants, and they were saying how it surged 45%, and they're since candidates have started using even just ChatGPT. Because I know that like even for my kids, they could go on and literally, I'm a high school student looking for a summer job. I've been a lifeguard once, and then it gives them a 2-page resume. So with all of these, the ability to auto-generate resumes, it's and the fact that companies are deploying their AI chatbots to screen them out, and at the same time candidates are going in and clicking on a chatbot that's going to auto apply for them. So they're calling it like this applicant tsunami, where LinkedIn was saying that they've had over 11,000 applicants per minute is where they are right now. And that's
Crazy.
not even Indeed. I mean, that really is a phenomenal, scary number. And we do see it with a lot of our customers as well, where you're like, okay, we've got these massive applicant pools, but they're not real. So it's they're not people who are actively interested in your job today. So it's a lot more of how do you weed through these huge pools. And when you think about, kind of my original answer to your question from a CRM standpoint, it's great that you've got all these people now in one space, but you've got to be able to kind of long term nurture those relationships and send them information and make your brand, at top of mind for them. So when they really are eager to move and to act on something, you already have that relationship and it's easier to turn them into a yes for those future needs. But it's kind of crazy how TA is so fun because it's changing so quickly and the way everybody's working is so different. I heard from a AI developer a couple weeks ago, and it was interesting to me. They were saying, you've got different systems that can automatically match and are giving your old versions of like ACE candidates. These are the people that are a best match for your position. And he said what they're seeing is people are getting really smart. I've got a resume and I've got my normal resume that I've written. And instead of running it through ChatGPT and customizing it for each job description, they're grabbing the job description for the company, the one that they're applying to, pasting it in white on the resume in like a tiny little font so that when the AI scans their resume and scans the job description, you're 100% match because they actually have the job description embedded in their resume. And that's their way of trying to get past gate number one to even be reviewed by a recruiter. So as people continue to just kind of gamify and everybody's, technology wise trying to one up how do you get past the AI or use the AI, it's making everybody's world a very different place when it comes to recruiting.
For
So
sure. It's
kind
so,
of
so
fun.
interesting. I'm always
Yeah,
intrigued by it and like I'm still behind, even though I look at it almost daily.
right? Like it's just something new to solve for every day. So I'll ask you, how do you recommend teams frame hiring needs to kind of skeptical leadership? So, because they hear a lot of the noise too, all the things that we're just sitting here talking about, that leadership is like, well, do we even, this is what's happening in the economy. This is what's happening with the workforce. This is people using AI. Are they really who they say they're going to be? How do we get leadership to frame their hiring needs so that we can get people in and help the organizations grow?
Yeah, well, fortunately, it's a simple answer, but always not easy to execute on. But the simple answer is you get business leaders and your leaders in your organization of the day when you are really trying to, create a change in skeptical leadership that you do it through speaking their language, right? The language of the audience you're speaking with and help drive their agenda. Is their agenda to upskill their organization? Is their agenda to fill open roles? Is their agenda to create some mobility internally or bring people in external, new skills? What is that? And so you talk to them about, the ROI of that job and the time that it takes to get a new hire up to full 100% productivity and try to quantify some of those financial returns, right? And And then risk mitigation. What happens if this team burns out? What happens if, this hire doesn't occur for you? What is the impact on the business? It's all back to business impact. It always has been. And sometimes we get so wrapped up in our world of metrics and candidates, and there's too many, and the things you just talked about, right? Trying to weed through all that, as we forget that we're trying to help the business achieve their goals and achieve their objectives. So you want to make sure you're helping them become competitive in the market, that you're future proofing for anything that can happen from a labor market standpoint, from a competitive standpoint, and use data. Data is the best way overall to help individuals really rethink, how they're going to be involved, overall, and how you're going to get them to get them on board from a leadership standpoint. Bottom line, always about the bottom line.
It is.
So, and I think through that, you think, there's a lot there, whether you talk about ROI or business acumen or recruiter acumen and all those things, right? So how can recruiting teams really partner with their internal learning and development organizations, their OD department, to think about upskilling as an example? How do you make that part of the hiring conversations? You're going to try to influence, senior leadership. Do you have some commentary or thoughts around how to help our recruiting, our TA teams do that better with their internal learning and development group?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even what you're saying about making everything back, I mean, the business is king, right? That's how the organization is running. Talent acquisition doesn't get to, I think that's why a lot of companies don't use the word recruiting anymore. We're not just a recruiting team that sits over here and does our thing. You have to be part of that talent development and integrated within the organization, whether it's understanding the business outcomes, but also a lot of companies are saying, you've got a VP of talent, meaning talent development and talent acquisition is what they're managing. And bringing those pieces together is really important to make sure that you're strategically going about hiring for the future as well as for today. So it is shifting that, let me find the perfect fit for the job we have right now, to let's find the great fit for who we have today, but also make sure we're hiring somebody that we can develop and they can grow within our organization. And the way that you do that, one, think about growth. And when you're writing a job description, emphasize learning and development potential within that role. People want to know that there's the ability to move up. I mean, it's when you look at even with the folks that are newer to the job market, they want to know how am I moving from a junior to a senior level position within this role in a very timely manner. So people do want to know that there's growth potential, and we want to make sure we're attracting candidates that have that growth mindset. So putting it in the job description is important. And then when you're interviewing, whether it's the recruiter doing the interviewing or the hiring manager, we've got to start assessing candidates for learnability and their potential to learn. So what is their aptitude to learn a new skill? And I don't just think it's their aptitude, but also it's their desire to learn something new. I think we used to just call some people are like your steady eddies. They want to come in and they're okay being in this same job for the next 20 years, but that's pretty rare nowadays, right? Most people they want to try variety, they want to change, and they want to do something else, and they want to grow and evolve within an organization. So making sure somebody has that mindset, and all of that is, you've got to have kind of some of that cross-functional training. So you've got learning development working with recruiting, and have them provide training to the recruiters on how to sell the company's L&D programs to the candidates. So it's all just kind of a very important partnership for that long-term strategy for a company to be more agile in these changing marketplaces. Because, even my kids that are in their early 20s, they're saying, oh my gosh, I keep hearing that all the jobs are going away because of AI. And I'm like, not at all. The jobs are changing, but your ability to change and grow with those is so, so important. So it's great that the companies kind of overcome some of those misconceptions that the kids are hearing about job opportunities by saying, we're going to bring you in, you have to add value, but we're also going to help you grow and evolve as the company grows and evolves.
Yeah, I think somebody in the chat said that the attitude is more important than aptitude, and attitude about learning is so critical, right? And you think about learnability and the steady eddies, it's like, of course, if I'd been a steady eddy where I was 20 years ago, I'd be obsolete.
Right.
right? And we all will be. I mean, there'll be so much change. So not only do they need to have the, you know, attitude about learning and development, they need to have the ability to learn and grow and change because things are going to change whether anyone changes or not. Yeah, that's great. Good point.
Agreed. So Darren, I know we've kind of talked about more than 5 things that people should take away, but if the audience was to just take one action after this webinar from the variety of things that we've talked about, what would one action be that people could do to have an impact within their organization immediately?
I think that if you are not sure what to do next or where to go next, I think the single thing that's going to make the biggest impact is do a hiring process audit. And if you'd like to, we can help you with that, but just getting a 30-minute audit with your key stakeholders. It's low barrier to entry. It's not a big project, but you can really do that pretty quickly and identify, if there's any needs from not a technician, but a technical standpoint. If you need software, identify that quickly. How do you boost efficiency, right? Uncover areas that might need leadership buy-in. I mean, you really can do some things pretty quick with just a process audit. Look at your process overall and find those gaps. And that will provide you with this foundation for improvement. You may say, well, you know what? Some of these things are going to cost money, whether it's technology or whether it's, big changes or things. That's okay. Build yourself a roadmap, right? Think about that. But doing this audit really will help you, pretty quickly clarify or the current bottlenecks and current inefficiencies and where can we begin to make impact overall. And honestly, it's empowering to know that. I mean, you may not be able to, you can't boil the ocean right in a single day, right? So it does help you understand that you're going to focus on 1 or 2 major pain points that if you address those things, they're going to have a positive impact on hiring speed and the quality and hopefully the quality of the candidate experience along the way. So don't try to fix everything at once. Just do the audit and then make small, consistent improvements and then document it because sometimes we forget to talk about the things that we've done and things that we do. And we forget to kind of let our leadership know they see you're doing great and you're doing well, but talk about the things that you're doing that's going to drive that up, along the way. And don't be afraid to celebrate your successes along the way, but do a quick 30-minute process audit. If you need help, let us know. We're happy to help you on that. It's pretty easy. We'll be happy to facilitate that for you as well. That's my one sales pitch, I guess.
1 or 2, right? Well, Melissa, do we have any questions? I know we've got
There's a few statements and whatnot, and more toward the beginning, I think someone had a really good point about candidate experience, that it's highly important and that a good one can ensure that the wanted candidates choose them. And I also think it'll also help them stay, I think, to add to that comment.
Mm-hmm.
When you were talking about the software, I know you mentioned a few, but someone did ask what software you were referring to. I know there's a lot out there, so maybe there's some basics that.
Yeah, I think Harriet asked that question. It looks like I was referring specifically to ours. It's called Recruiting Machine. It's our CRM ATS tool that's proprietary to Engage to Excel, and it has a really cool candidate comparison grid that we use on that. And so happy to show you more on that. If you're interested, just reach out and let us know, and be glad to show you more of that.
Great. And then I think there was one more comment about hiring teams should live by ethics, particularly if you're doing lateral hiring for senior leadership roles. So I think more specific.
Yeah.
And then, yep, go ahead.
The last question as we kind of come up on our time is, what are your thoughts on doing reference checks as being part of the interview recruitment process? Interestingly enough, I'm actually in Dallas this week, and there is I'm not sure what kind of conference it is, but it's like the Texas Association of Criminal Background Checks is here in this hotel. And there's all kinds of probation officers and everyone else around today having that conversation. But reference checks are interesting. There's a new dynamic around reference checks that has occurred in the last 10 to 15 years. Andrea, I'll put you on the spot and see if you kind of want to answer that after I say my one little thing. I think reference checks can be valuable given the veracity of the person who's providing the reference. I think that is so key around understanding the strengths and weaknesses of the individual that you want to hire. I think blanket reference checks blind reference checks are pretty worthless because of the veracity of the person. I did kind of answer, but Andrea, if you have any thoughts, please. It does slow it down, yes.
Yes, of course it slows down because it's, a lot of the systems now, if you're asking a reference check that's talking about their job performance, it's usually a form and you're giving people 24, 48, 36 hours to complete it. And the candidate has to nudge it along and it can knock people out. And if that person just doesn't, I mean, the amount of email that people get nowadays, half the time you miss a reference check unless somebody's told you, please keep an eye out for this email to complete it. I think a lot of people do look on things like LinkedIn and who do we know in common, and they're doing reference checks probably out of a formal process, but they're checking behind it because it is important to understand the quality of the individual that you're looking at hiring. And I was talking with somebody from a couple of very large banks, and I was even surprised to learn they were saying that when they do their, background check package, it was costing like $1,500. And I was like, holy smokes, that's a massive fee, right? And they were saying that now and I had to go research it myself, some of these packages, they're actually checking people's, such a sensitive topic, they're doing social checks. So they're looking at the media and what people are putting out publicly and using that to see if they're a fit to the organization. So when you mention reference checks, my head went to all of the different ways that things can go. And there are some very reputable companies that are now offering those packages. And I think that's such a dicey space to be in because it will be interesting just how legal gets a hold of that and how people use that information too to make business decisions. So we are definitely venturing on a whole new frontier when it comes to checking and what we want to know and how we use that to make decisions.
Great. Well, I know we're up on our time and there's still more questions coming through, so we can always reach out to those individuals separately to answer them. Thank you, Andrea and Darren, for, as always, a interesting topic that seems to change weekly.
Yeah.
And thank you for joining us today. We hope you found this insightful and valuable, and we'll look to see you guys sometime in the future again.
Thanks everyone.
Great.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.